Did you know that, originally, when they were coming up with the concept of Kratos, they went through many different renditions of the character? He had long hair at one point. His tattoo was going to look like a skull mask. He was going to wear armor. However, the one thing we're glad they changed with certainty is that Kratos' tattoo was originally going to be blue. Glad they switched it to the iconic red.
Athena! You will suffer for this!
God of War games are known for their epic boss battles and insanely high-quality set pieces. However, in the case of God of War 2, this is even more prevalent. God of War 2 has a total of 14 boss fights, meaning it's the game with the most boss fights in the series. It's followed by God of War 3, with 9 boss fights, and Ghost of Sparta with 6. Not to mention, God of War 2 is also widely recognized as the toughest game in the franchise, with the most brutal battles at high difficulty. Speaking of Ghost of Sparta, there were a couple of spin-off games in the franchise, but none quite so unique as God of War Betrayal. Betrayal is quite literally the only game in the franchise that was never released on a Sony PlayStation platform. Not to mention, it's also the only game in the God of War franchise that doesn't have any bonus costumes. While Kratos' cold-hearted murdering schemes did not come to an end until the very end of his Olympian journey, God of War, Chains of Olympus has the only instance in the Greek-era God of War where Kratos smiles. He is seen smiling when holding his daughter in the air. This was the only instance of Kratos smiling up until God of War 2018, where Kratos is seen smiling with Atreus. God of War 3 was a brutal game, featuring lots of gods dying. However, aside from the Blade of Exile from Athena, every single new weapon Kratos acquired to his arsenal, he kills the previous owners with that exact weapon. Whether it be Hercules' gauntlets or Hermes' boots, he used their weapons to kill them, and kills to acquire them.
Kratos, your death will not be a gentle one.
God of War Ghost of Sparta broke some classic God of War traditions that the franchise had been running with since its conception. It was the first PlayStation God of War game in the franchise to not be released in March, and it showcased Kratos' tattooed left side instead of the scarred right side. While we know that Athena is one of the mainstay characters in the franchise, and has almost always been the one helping Kratos and fueling his vengeance. However, God of War Ascension is the only game in the franchise where Athena doesn't aid Kratos in his journey. In fact, Athena doesn't even appear for a split second in God of War Ascension. While most people think that this is the first time God of War has entered into a different mythology, it is indeed not the case. God of War Chains of Olympus featured aspects of Persian, Arab, and Irish mythology in the forms of the basilisk, the Efreet, and the Banshee. Not to mention, God of War 2 features the Kraken, which originates from the Scandinavian mythology as well. God of War Ragnarok is the upcoming game in the franchise, and while not much is known about the game yet, there is one thing confirmed and is quite different for the series. Instead of being a trilogy like the original series, God of War Ragnarok will conclude the Norse saga, meaning that Kratos' time in the Norse pantheon will be over by the end of Ragnarok, and he will either move on to a different pantheon or perhaps have a brutal end like most people were expecting.
In moments of crisis, Panic does nothing. Harness it. Let it serve you.